Hi, welcome to Christine's Corner. We have a special guest who came back with, is Richard Jackson. Hi, Richard. Thanks for coming back. That was very informational what you said. If for those who didn't see the first one show, he's a master spiritual of normalities. Anomalies. I'm sorry.
Abnormalities.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not incorrect.
All right. So just for our ones who are watching, what does that mean? What do you do?
Well, there's things that to some people, how did this happen? And, we've been doing that since man, emerged and began to, form our cultures and civilizations. And sometimes what we thought was this, crazy abnormality, well, it was magnetism. It was something explainable. But that said, once we've mastered certain sciences, et cetera, clearly there are things that happen to me. Sometimes I'm grateful, other times I almost wished it wasn't quite like that, because I can never undo the fact, both good, bad, and neutral, that things and people have appeared to me who I know were not of this earth. I have had unbelievable luck, and it really was luck, clearly, and something at bay, working in favor of me and my client, because there were too many times that doctors have said to my clients, I love to talk about Richard's work, but I can't lose my job, because there have been healings and women being able to get pregnant who couldn't for over a decade plus.
Wow.
And a lot of these, the answer is actually spiritual. And it wasn't that I did anything so great, it's just that I understood there were more things to be used and available. And I guess on a religious basis, you'd say, well, asking God for help. Yeah, but, doing it in the way that I've known to do it, everybody has their own style.
Yeah. What are your plans to expand and reach out?
Well, at the tender age of 71, I'm just now feeling like I think I know what I want to do when I grow up.
Wow.
And that is, I want to take the amount of people who know of me, the amount of great press I've had, some of the stuff I've been on film and that I've been involved in people's lives, and I want to put that information out there for a lot of people. So my book writing is going to be capping my career, not starting it. In addition, the second site that'll be up within a month, thefreakingtruth.com, as opposed to the richardpjackson.com, one will be up and running, and what it's going to have is little rants, like little speeches on various subjects that we can all more or less agree on. And we need to find that as a basis to all get along. We really do. We may not agree on the cause of something, but we can agree something is happening. There's always things we can agree on. That's being lost to us. We're in danger. This is almost something that is not just spiritual, but it very much takes in the spirit world, the way we are growing into a world and a nation of cultism.
Cultism?
Yeah. People going off in little corners, and they're not talking like, well, we don't believe in that, but we could all get together. Yeah, we believe that. We don't want to mix with you people. That's getting more and more. And then in that group, it's like, well, we don't mind mixing with those people, and then this, well, we don't mix with anyone. And it's getting further and further. People are going off into the extreme, because that is usually the tendency, and it's a spiritual, and as a scientist by education, it is more or less the way of all things. Everything is at once expanding, and it's also contracting. Things are traveling here, but to travel there, they're leaving here. There's always kind of two things that happen, or more, to everything that happens. If a universe has an exploding star, there's great destruction, but there's also things that are created. And the same thing spiritually, and the same thing culturally. And our society is exploding right now. It may not go beyond and be all that kind of changes us and makes us better in time. It may have us go laterally and we have to get over on things. We seem to do better when people have to come together and work together than when everything's going okay. We tend to go our separate ways and we start throwing darts at each other.
Oh,
And some of that, there's a spiritual implications there. Sometimes there's a spiritual implication, sure. And I'd be justified in saying that. Other times, it's much more spiritual than people know, and that includes the Third Reich in Germany, and many other times that distinguish itself from others because while it was historical in what happened, it was also highly spiritual. And for example, the Third Reich was based on a society that was called the Krill Society. It's where the National Socialist Party came from. And it was a group of 4 parties in Germany that were into the occult, but they were also with the firm belief that the inside of the earth was hollow and was composed of Atlanteans from Atlantis, people or beings from the planet Vril. I didn't mean to say Krill, that's a science fiction movie. But the Vril Society was the name. And also fallen angels. And that for some reason they were there to help give some power because they wanted the Aryans to take over as the most distinguished and the most plausible, the most advanced of humanity's genetic strains, you know, the Aryan Brotherhood. And that when Germany did its part, they would come out because the earth was hollow, say for 150-mile crust, and they would establish the Third Reich. Now, I know people who believe in this. When I told them that, they said, "You're crazy, that's not what it is." And I went, "Do your homework." And they found out that's not far from the truth.
wow. You have great questions here that you gave to me. I know you have, I know you have to be strong about chronic, sorry, I can't read it. What about the spirituality?
Like of illnesses and things like that?
Yeah. What about chronic
Tick-borne illness.
Tick-borne illness?
Yeah, that
what
was
about
my
that?
writing, not your reading. That was my writing.
Oh.
And that's actually the point. I used to have great handwriting, but I tend to cramp. I've had nonstop tick bites. Is there anything spiritual to it? No, that's not what I'm saying.
You got Lyme disease.
For the time I was a kid, I would take ticks off. Now, Lyme was discovered in the 80s. I believe it was the 80s. But not really. The spirochete that causes Lyme was weaponized on purpose by a scientist who came over from Germany, and he was forced into doing what he was doing, which was to try to have the Russian population unable to work. And the vehicle were ticks. And in fact, the spirochete that causes that we call Lyme, was accidentally weaponized. And whether it was weaponized or not, in and of itself, we are finding woolly mammoths and cavemen and other animals, literally from prehistoric times, where there's evidence of spirochete infestation, which means Lyme, or what we call Lyme disease. And it's as old as the hills, but it was made worse. And whether it's part of it being made worse, because we have to know what other countries might be doing, so we have to protect ourselves. So for a while it was an idea that this was some kind of conspiracy from Plum Island in Long Island Sound. No, Plum Island, which comes from the movie with the sheeps, the one with Anthony Hopkins, the lamb. There's something about the lamb.
Oh.
Okay, right.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay,
yeah.
And I'm sure our people know.
Yeah, I'm sure they know, yeah.
And he was given the right, if he helped, that he would get a week on Plum Island. That is, in fact, an NSA place where they're testing, because, look, I want my country to be prepared for stuff. I have no problem with that at all.
Right.
And yet, no one thought that...
Silence of the Lambs.
Silence of the Lambs, thank you. And what happened is, no one thought about the birds and rabbits and the little things and creatures and the birds that fly is going to eventually, there's going to be ticks that were infected and they reached out and they got all their animals outside at that time, and they eventually came into the flyway and went to Saybrook or Lyme. So one gentleman got very sick. They couldn't get him well. I mean, I think he pulled through eventually. He had simply one simple case of Lyme. Other people, sometimes in their work, are bitten many, many times.
Wow.
And along with the Lyme, just like if you get a dog bite, you could get an anaerobic infection, an aerobic infection. You can get rabies. You can get staph. You can get strep infection, from that one bite.
Wow.
Well, from some of the bites from some of the Lyme ticks, which, by the way, is almost exactly like syphilis in nature.
Oh.
Some people get psychologically crazy, some people get bipolar, some people have looks like MS kind of symptoms, some ALS, some fibromyalgia, some pneumonia, all of the above. But there are also other viruses that jump on that bacteria, as well as other bacterias, as well as protozoa. So I had Babesia, protozoa, Ehrlichiosis, Lyme, and I was a hiker. I always said, these little things are, these little, I used to call them, stickers, and then I got the word ticks.
You don't mind I said Lyme, that you have Lyme?
No, not at all.
Right.
Because I was active and I
leading
helped
up
a lot
to
of people go to the right doctors. And now medicine's starting to come on board, because for a while, medicine is conservative, it moves slow. It doesn't believe things until nearly half a generation just proves it to be true. So that's just the way of all things. But it was, in fact, by me doing a good deed for a military base that put me into a friendship circle that brought me to Maryland, where I worked a lot with the National Museum for Civil War Medicine to clear it, because it was very spiritually haunted.
Oh.
And actually soldiers were still going there thinking it was a field hospital.
Wow.
And people were really being bothered and frightened. So it was very successful. I did benefits after. I had people coming to ask me for interviews or for my presence or help from France to England and Japan and anything in between. So we had a lot of notoriety, a lot of front page headlines and stuff, and we dehaunted it.
Good.
But in dehaunting it, one person who was friends with the curator and her daughter said, I'm a Mormon, but my priest, he happens to be a bishop. I talked about you, and he goes, I have a good feeling. I think you could make an exception. Go see what he has to say. Talk to him. Well, I told her what was going to happen to her, and she goes, well, you got half right. What she didn't realize at the time was the part I got right wasn't the part I got really dead on until a year and a half later, when it came true. And she, in fact, met a man by the name I said she would in the state of Pennsylvania. And don't ask me how the heck I possibly got this information. I'm just rambling on like I am with you now, and I'm telling her what I'm getting, what's popping in my head. When he heard that I said by name her family would be sick for 6 months, and they'd run into a guy named Bick, and they did. He demanded to meet me. He identified that I, in fact, had Lyme disease, and we worked out something. And this man worked with my whole family for 12 years, pro bono.
Wow.
And helped all of us.
Wow, that was really nice.
It was better than nice.
Any stories that you could tell a story about you?
Well,
you just said one, but.
Okay, there's one. Here's an interesting one. I think we had at some point mentioned this. I had gone to get a lot of training in the paranormal is one thing, but spiritual gifts are another. So, I understood some I'm going to get here, and some by experience. So one of the things is, I remember Ed and Lorraine Warren actually mentioned once in a conversation on a long drive, and they talked about how cute this little place was called Lilydale, and it's the spiritualist center of spiritualism in the world. It's in Cassadaga, New York, like way past Buffalo, way right near, I think, Chautauqua Lake, I think it is, where it's...
I think I've heard of it from a pagan, though.
Yeah, because all kinds of people go there. I've seen people there who are ministers and priests of all, because it's interesting. And it's like a little walled city with a beach, with a fire department, with a garden, with a labyrinth. And for 3 months a year, they do free services, healings. They don't try to dispute any religion at all, as many of them are. In fact, usually tend to be more progressive or liberal, Methodist, Unitarian ministers and things of that nature. But I liked them. I wasn't about to be a spiritualist, but I like what they had to say. We prove survival of bodily death through the gifts of spiritual healing and messages. And everyone knows about John Edwards' messages. And I do, because he was a guest medium, as I was, and got a message, and he was dead on.
Wow.
And we then met some years later, which was kind of interesting. But at this place, very interesting, the workshop I did was about taking pictures of spirits. Okay? And the stories that I could tell, I wouldn't know where to begin and end. There's so many, but one was I became very good friends with a minister there who, even if I didn't finish, I started with her the hypnotherapy classes to be a hypnotherapist, and then realized I don't want 2 days of training. I want a year of training. I want to be a teacher. I want to know this stuff because it's helpful to people. And it gives me more credibility in helping people, that beyond my education and my experience in this stuff and any gifts people feel, well, then there's also training in peripheral, because whenever anyone has trauma, either beforehand or after the fact, there's little ways that they need healing tools. There may be illness in the house. It might be bereavement. It might be, somebody who was violated, or, was sexually abused, or who was isolated or abandoned, or people who have, the ability to do something, and yet they can barely get the simple task done. But if you ask them to multiply 8.70,000 by 9.58 and divide it by 87, they'll give you the answer by the time you finish your sentence.
Wow.
And all those things, are they spiritual or are they of a different nature? So there's a point where they kind of mix a little. Maybe one is one, maybe one is the other. Maybe they complement each other. But I wanted as much training as I could. Reiki, hypnotherapy, kinesiology, dowsing. So a few of those I started at Lilydale. So I treated my then significant other, and we were coming back on Halloween. And it was 70 degrees. We, even though it was closed to their summer traffic, we had a wonderful time. It was actually, I got certified as being a deep trance medium. We had an intense 3-day workshop. And on the way back, it got cold quick. It's a long ride. It's about 470 miles.
Wow.
And as the air got cooler and we went the first 60, 70 miles, snowflake, lake effect, we're in western New York, and it didn't stop. It kept snowing. It's snowing, not in the forecast, but now we're basically plowing the highway with my car.
Yeah.
And Savannah's going, you got to keep going.
Wow.
We're going at 28 miles an hour. You got to keep going. I went, okay. Well, by the time we got to Binghamton, New York, the highway, once we got through the city, Highway 17 closed. We got a motel. It was right off the entry where it was barricaded. And I'm sorry, I was bitchy. I went, oh, Sam, you had to get there to get the kids back. It's okay. And, we were very good friends too. And her name was Sam. So we lay down in bed and we're both looking at each other. I'm so tired, I can't sleep. Me too. Put on TV. TV goes on. Exactly 3. It's a story called One Step Beyond. It's a clone of the Twilight Zone. I'm not saying that demeaningly. It's like the Twilight Zone. It's its own show. And it was a show about a guy named Richard Jackson.
Wow.
From New Haven, creepy. Connecticut, where I was born.
Wow.
And lived most of my life. And I take pictures of ghosts.
And you did all that.
And this was when
that was
people
on
didn't
TV.
take many pictures of ghosts. In fact, when I first started, Ed was telling me, even a lot of people who very much believe in all this stuff, they were a little suspicious that people could actually get pictures of these things. And in fact, that has long since changed. And my pictures are in some of their books. And they have a lot of copies. Whoever in the organization still has them.
Next time you come, maybe you can bring.
I'd be happy to.
Oh, that would be great.
And what had happened in this particular case, which I still get a kick out of, is as I'm looking at the TV screen with Sam, we're like this going, who did this show? Where did they get this in? Who produced it? We're getting made in I believe it was, I'm quite sure it was 1986. Might have been 84. It was either 84 or 86. I just knew that was a few years ago. That's all I remembered in my head going, how did they get that information?
Yeah.
And I kept seeing something that may have been theoretical. I'm not saying I was privy to knowledge, but I kept seeing a young writer who was home with his child from his girlfriend or his wife. She's at work. They have a little place in Orange County, little tiny pool made up their backyard in a little ranch house. And he's trying to think of a story, and he's going, yeah, I think I'll do one on somebody who takes pictures of ghosts. I'll make it New England with kind of a Yankee name like Jackson. Hartford, nah. Boston, nah. Maine, Stephen King got that. I'll make it New Haven, Connecticut. And he didn't understand this at the time. But what he was doing was he was extricating knowledge of what had not yet happened, but was going to happen from the collective consciousness, or maybe somebody else would have other words, but clearly he got the information somewhere.
Somewhere.
And he wrote it down.
To get all that precise information about you.
And when I do workshops on the different levels of consciousness, because we operate just like a radio on several levels. And sometimes we don't need to know that, but sometimes it's helpful to know that we operate on a few bases at the same time. As I'm speaking to you, I might just say to my house, ooh, I locked my truck. Okay? Or, ooh, I'm glad I had some water before I came on the show. You know, whatever it happens to be, we do things in multiple effects. One of them, which quite frankly surprised me more than anyone, is when a couple that is known to the extent they had an article on the husband. Wife was extraordinary too. She survived the Holocaust as a baby and went on to become a Buddhist, became a Catholic. He, Bill Pulig, wonderful, and her name is Cassandra. They became very good friends. He's a reenactor and a darn good foot doctor for the military. And they were on the board of the museum. And he was kind of skeptical until he asked a question, and I answered it before he asked it. I go, is this about the little girl at the bottom of the stairs? He almost fell down. So she had asked me, Richard, we'd stayed over there for the second time. And, you know, over the years, because I had returned, this is a 5-year run, so to speak, I call it, where I'm spending about a month of the year in this area. The Gettysburg battlefield was a big center, the town of Frederick. Not only Gettysburg, but Antietam. So we had things to do, blessings to do on the neighbor's orchard, on their barn. But this one was Cassandra approached me and said, I have a disease. Should I get a double lung transplant? And I went, we got to go. We had a laugh over that. I went, wow, talk about pressure. She goes, I just, if you get anything, let me know. Well, she called me 2 days later to tell me, thank you. Why are you thanking me at 8 o'clock in the morning? Because you sat on our bed at 5 in the morning. Bill woke me and said, Richard's sitting on our bed. No, I was clearly in Woodbridge with my arm always on the shoulder of my significant partner of 22 years, and I was in Woodbridge while I was there with a smirk on my face, and they said a good 3 to 4 minutes.
Wow.
Of real time. That's a lot.
Yeah.
It's called bilocation. I didn't know I was doing it. I didn't know how to. I wouldn't know how to now. But evidently, when they said, is this about the operations? I wouldn't answer anything. And then she said, should I get it? And I went,
wow.
And disappeared.
Wow.
That was about 25, 26 years ago. She's still doing fine.
Still doing fine.
It was an experimental operation.
Wow.
It was unlikely she would survive the operation. It was 50-50.
Wow. Those great stories that you came with. It was a pleasure listening to your answers and your questions. Please come again. We have to go, sadly. And we'll see you next time on Christine's Corner. And thank you again for coming.
Christine, you're a pleasure, and I'd love to be on again. And I want to hear some of your stories.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.